Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.
You are watching Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. I am one of your co-hosts here, alongside my intrepid co-host, Rania Khalek. I'm Eugene Puryear. Jesus Christ, forgot to say my name there, but here alongside Rania, as always. Well, not as always, because we aren't virtually alongside each other. We are. I knew you were going to do it anyway. Yep, you can't.
Where's
quite
there it is. There it is.
Can't quite make it.
You guys, I am sitting next to Eugene right now. Like,
yes,
for real.
Live, in the flesh. It's happening. This is it.
We didn't pay someone to show him a hand. That was me.
That you know of. Nonetheless, very happy to have you here with us. We've got a great show, as you have already seen, I'm sure. We'll be talking about Haiti, where it appears there may be another invasion and occupation imminent here. Joe Biden talking about that this week at the United Nations General Assembly. We'll be talking about the Iran-U.S. relationship with the prisoner exchange that just took place there. We'll be talking about ongoing issues in the Horn of Africa. We'll be talking about Zelenskyy bringing his begging bowl to Capitol Hill. We'll be talking, hopefully, also as well about the ongoing fight to stop Cop City, and an update on where the UAW strike is from someone who has been out in the field reporting and talking to auto workers for several weeks. So we've got a lot on deck here for you, which is a good time to remind you that we always have a lot going. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and then also hit the bell so you get the alerts for the things that you subscribe to. But a lot of great stuff, including Dispatches with Rania Khalek, which there's a new episode today, by the way. So make sure you check that out. Rania, what else should our viewers know?
Well, I want to say, I noticed somebody in the comments before we even started said they've already liked the video, so they don't get lectured.
Yes.
So I want to remind people, thank you. Good on you. I'm not going to lecture you, but everybody else, please do like the show. If you haven't already, it helps us in the algorithm. And even more importantly, if you support the Freedom Side and all of our other great programming at Breakthrough News, you can become a member of Breakthrough News by going to patreon.com/Breakthrough News and becoming a patron, where you can access exclusive content, including parts of my show Dispatches, as well as Eugene's monthly seminar on Africa. And
yes,
I'm so excited to do this. You know, I've been waiting to do this.
Drop it on them.
You can also get very cool merch.
There it is, the mug.
There it is.
That is real life. There it is.
The Breakthrough mug. Look how beautiful that is.
It's very nice. Well designed.
I'm definitely taking this home with me.
If you become a patron at the correct level, we'll make sure we let you.
If we can get 5 new patrons right now, I get to keep this mug.
Well, yes, I agree to that. If we have 5 new patrons right now, Rania will be able to keep the mug. So you would hate for her to be mugless, wouldn't you guys? I hope you do. So we will go ahead and get things started, but make sure you let folks know we are here on the Freedom Side, so whoever's following you can be following us. But first, we want to turn to the United Auto Workers, who continue to be on strike against the big 3 auto corporations, GM, Ford, and Stellantis. For those who don't know, it used to be Chrysler. And there's more coming, and so we are very happy to be joined as we continue the show by Hussein Karimi, who is an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, who has been in Indiana, Detroit, and all over the auto zone, if you will, over the past couple weeks. Hussein, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're happy to have you on here. You've been in Indiana, you've been in Detroit, and we want to talk a little bit about that, but maybe just to give people some context, you know, we're hearing a lot that there's a deadline coming up on Friday, that more places could go out on strike. So just maybe give us a capsule view of where things stand right now in terms of the workers' demands and the strike being extended potentially.
Yeah, I mean, we had a team out in Kokomo, Indiana for 10 days, and I think we got a really good sense of the core issues that workers are facing. And at the end of the day, there's a reason why everyone has this slogan on their shirt: record profits should mean record contracts, because these huge billion-dollar auto companies have made $250 billion in the last 10 years, and workers' wages have remained stagnant. And among the core issues include really substantial and fair wage increases, abolishing the two-tier system, and protections against plant closures, among many other issues. But these are the ones that we've heard come up over and over and over again. Thus far, and the reason why the UAW struck the 3 plants that are out right now in Wentzville, Missouri, and Wayne, Michigan, and Toledo, Ohio, is that Stellantis, GM, Ford, these auto companies haven't come back to the table with a fair agreement. And like you mentioned, tomorrow at 10 a.m., additional plants will be announced to go out if they don't reach a fair agreement.
And then I'm curious, I saw that Donald Trump is trying to take advantage of this moment and is saying that he plans to meet with striking UAW auto workers in Detroit. I think during the second Republican debate. And so I guess my question is, there is this, I think, idea that a lot of these kinds of people might lean Republican, though I don't think that's true because most union people tend to vote Democrat. But it does seem like there is this attempt to sort of like politically use it. What's Biden doing? Like, are Democrats even paying attention? Do they care? Or is this a situation where like a Republican like Donald Trump, who's obviously incredibly anti-worker, could actually successfully take advantage?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And this is one of the other reasons we went to Kokomo is there's this idea promoted by liberal pundits that these areas are so conservative, and it's a source of cynicism for a lot of people to prevent people from feeling that, we can make significant change in this country economically, socially, and so on. And what we found is that people were very, very open to progressive and even radical political ideas, because at the end of the day, they know that they're the ones that make these companies run. Those profits, the other slogan that was on people's shirts were record profits were unpaid wages. They know that without them, these companies wouldn't make a dime. And so the idea that the workers who make these billions of dollars in profits and in fact make the world run should have a say in how the world is run, if not run the world themselves, people were very receptive to. And of course, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have clamored to the auto struggle and have tried to capture a lot of support from workers in the UAW. On the surface, Joe Biden has said that he supports the UAW, but his policies tell a different story. And as the UAW has said, actions speak louder than words. And the Inflation Reduction Act is a huge sticking point for workers. It was passed in 2022, and it's giving billions of dollars in public money to these auto companies to refit, retool, build mass EV and battery plants with no requirement to maintain good union jobs. And so people are very frustrated with the current administration's actions, but workers are also not so loyal to Trump either, because he campaigned on bringing auto jobs back to the United States. And if you look at his record, not much has changed. So I think this has contributed to a very interesting situation where workers are open to an alternative solution.
One of the things I'm curious about whether you heard or what you heard from workers about this is maybe the physical toll that's taken on their body doing these jobs. I mean, I noticed that Republican presidential candidate and current senator for South Carolina, Tim Scott, was ridiculing them for asking for fewer hours to work, each week in terms of how it goes. But from what I understand, one of the main issues on the issue of how often you're working is the physical toll that it takes and the difficulty to really recover your body and the times they give you to turn around. So anyway, before I editorialize too much, I wonder if you heard that from workers where you were.
Yes, I think this is one of the issues that was the most damning against the companies. We were in Detroit and we met a worker who was her plant was in critical status. And what that means is that workers there can they can be forced to work up to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for a 90-day period in each contract cycle. And so many, if not all, Chrysler plants in Detroit at the time we were there were in critical status. So imagine you're working 84 hours a week. You don't know when you're going to get home from work. You can be told just a few hours before you expect to get off, oh, actually, you're going to be working forced overtime. You can be doing that for 90 days straight. And people, of course, have to sacrifice so many things in their life, picking up their kids from school, taking their kids from school, because, you know, many people start their shift at midnight. They get off at 8 a.m. or noon the next day. One person we spoke to in Detroit tore her meniscus, and she was told, go to the company doctor. And the doctor told her, you're totally fine. Here's a pair of crutches. We expect you back to work the next day. She came back to work. A month later, she went to a real doctor that wasn't a company stooge, and she realized her meniscus was torn and that she was walking on it for an entire month. And so just imagine the damage that does on someone's body. To only be making, 15 for a temporary part-time worker who may even be working at a plant for 5 to 10 years, making $16 an hour, completely eroding your health and your body. In Kokomo, one of the plants, the casting plant, which is the largest die casting plant in the world, people are working with 1,400 degree molten aluminum. And the company has refused to staff a nurse at this plant unless there are 300 workers on shift. And I mean, you can only imagine the types of safety issues that people deal with every minute of every day working at that plant. And there have been many where a nurse isn't present, and people get seriously injured at these plants. So I think safety, health, and also scheduling they're major issues.
And of course, you see a lot of the corporate media coverage, and a lot of it just kind of parrots the narrative and talking points of the industry CEOs. A lot of it is about, we don't have the money for this. We have to switch to electric, and it means less workers, and we have to invest in that. And so it's this idea that it's either this or that, and the money just isn't there. I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but is that the reality of the situation or not?
I mean, I think this is one of the reasons we were well received in Kokomo. People were very frustrated with this narrative that was promoted by the corporate media, and they're giving more airtime to the executives who are making $20+ million a year, sitting in their office watching stock prices go up and down, never step foot on a production line in their life, saying, well, we don't have enough money to pay you what you deserve. And I think people see through this ridiculous argument that there's not enough money to, or we can't transition to EV in a just way. And the union, I think correctly so, is saying we're not against a transition to electric vehicles. We recognize climate change is very, very real, but the way that's done can't mean the layoff of tens of thousands of workers, people having to uproot their entire lives, move to another state if they're lucky to get a job at a different plant, and be without a union. People should be able to remain employed at a decent wage, be able to raise a family, have a home, and have the type of job that existed 20, 30 years ago, before the 2008 financial crisis and the collapse of the auto industry, that the companies didn't foot the bill for, the executives didn't foot the bill for, but taxpayers and workers did.
Mm. Well, Hussein, before we let you go, you did do a lot of coverage there. You had a lot of interviews with many different workers explaining their own experiences and why they're on strike. Where can people find that work if they're curious to hear more from auto workers themselves?
Yeah, no, and we're most likely going to be back out there if the UAW announces additional plants that will be going out tomorrow morning. And definitely encourage folks to follow us. We're at PSL National on all social media platforms, on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. I did not forget TikTok. There are a lot of auto workers on TikTok. Some of our videos did their best on that platform. And many young workers too, who are TPTs, who make up a significant portion of the membership, who who are on that platform. So definitely encourage everyone to follow us, share the videos, because more people across the country are realizing this isn't just a fight about auto workers, it's a fight for the entire working class and the ability to preserve and expand good union jobs.
Well, Hussein, really appreciate you giving us some of your very valuable time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we'll have to see what goes down, Eugene.
We will. We'll see tomorrow. I mean, I know Stellantis brought back another inadequate, but they brought back another proposal, so they may be trying to find a way out of this if they can. But we'll see what the next piece is. I mean, a poll was done just before the strike began. 75% of people in the United States supporting the United Auto Workers on this one, and I think you're seeing it if you are on any social media that is a very wide breadth and depth of people who are supporting them. And we'll have to keep covering it and keep looking at it, but very, very interesting issue that after the Teamsters strike could really turn things around, I think, for workers in this country in a big way. And also want to note the Mercedes-Benz workers in Alabama who are UAW members also on strike now. Different contract, but still important.
Wait, I'm sorry. You mean Mercedes are made by people?
Yes.
I had no idea. I just assumed it came out of some sort of machine and then luxury or, rich people bought it. And
Well,
that was it.
yeah, no.
Right?
Sadly, many people, South Carolina, Alabama, all over the U.S. South. But we are going to turn our attention here to U.S.-Iran relations and a recent prisoner swap that took place between the two countries that's caused a little bit of discord in the mainstream media with certain figures, as you might imagine. We are very, very happy to be joined as we continue the show by Mazda Majidi, who is an organizer with the Answer Coalition. Mazda, thanks so much for being back with us.
Hi, Eugene. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Well, it's great to have you. Maybe just to start, I don't want to assume necessarily that people have heard all that much about this, Mazda. I'm sure people have heard that there was a prisoner exchange of sorts between the U.S. and Iran and that some money was exchanged. But could you explain what exactly took place?
Sure. The exchange involved 5 people who were sentenced for espionage in Iran. These are Iranian dual citizenship Iranian Americans, and 5 people in the U.S., also Iranian Americans, dual citizens, who were supposedly engaged in trying to get parts for going around the sanctions on Iran to get those parts for Iran. In addition, it involved freeing up close to $6 billion worth of Iranian assets, and that's important to emphasize because some right-wing pundits in the U.S. are making it sound as if the U.S. is handing Iran money. But when the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was suspended illegally by Trump, these were monies that were frozen in South Korea, and it took like months of work and preparation and so forth. But close to $5.7 billion were taken to a bank, or actually a series of banks in Qatar, where they're now going to be accessible to Iran. So 5 prisoners on each side, plus unfreezing $6 billion of Iranian assets.
And a lot of the narrative in the media, is so like, oh, the American prisoners in Iran, but I don't think many people even know that there was these Iranians, some who are also American, by the way, being held in the U.S. for supposedly violating sanctions against Iran. I know not all of them were in jails, but there's all this talk about Iran and prisoners and human rights records. But of course, the same isn't applied to the U.S. I mean, U.S. prisons are just one human rights atrocity. I'm just a little bit curious, what's the significance of what happened to those people? Because I actually was not aware before this, I started hearing about this potential prisoner exchange, that there were people being prosecuted in the U.S. for violating U.S. sanctions against Iran.
Yeah, the sanctions, I'm glad you asked that question, Rania. The sanctions are very complicated, have many aspects, and have been implemented in a series of actions by the U.S. government. In fact, it almost seems like every other week there's a new round of sanctions. In fact, it just happened a few days ago when Biden announced a new round of sanctions. So it is very, very difficult for Iran to conduct trade internationally. Any entities, states, or companies that trade with Iran are punished with millions of dollars. And not only that, it's a lot of companies and corporations actually refuse to deal and trade with Iran altogether because it's so complicated. It's not worth the risk for them because they can't figure out what's allowed and what's not allowed. And they would, I assume, require their lawyers to spend hours and hours going through the laws to figuring out what's allowed and what's not allowed. So as a result, there's been, even in the past, there's been Iranian citizens in the U.S. who've been imprisoned. And I don't know in every instance, but I assume in some instances, they were trying to bypass the sanctions. And in other instances, they may not even have known it. Or they may have thought it's a gray area. But these are individuals who are they're not spies by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they don't even have close ties to the Iranian government. One of them didn't even want to go to Iran. They just stayed in the U.S. after they were freed. Another one went to the U.K. So yes, there's been these individuals imprisoned, Iranian individuals imprisoned in the U.S.
It really does seem to say something about about a lot of different things, Mazda, that we're even in this moment. Of course, many people thought when Biden came in, the maximum pressure campaign of Trump would be dropped, but it seems like it's actually been doubled down on and pushed further by Biden. Even at the G20, proposing this road to cross Saudi Arabia, designed to try to cut Iran out of trade coming from Asia to Europe and different pieces like that. The sanctions that you mentioned. I would also add this, quixotic attempt to expand the Abraham Accords. As much as everyone was sort of hyping up the change in administration, it seems that there's a pretty unified bipartisan view here, Mazda, that Iran is an enemy that must be crushed, basically. What's behind this united front against Iran?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Eugene, because it was unprecedented. And in the U.S. media, this is talked about as if, Trump kind of opted out. There was no opting out in that accord in the JCPOA. In fact, it was very specific. There were very specific mechanisms spelled out in the accord of what happens if one of the signing parties disagrees. And the signing parties was pretty much everyone. The U.S., its junior imperialist partners in Europe, and Russia and China. And of course, many people might have thought that once Biden is elected president, they'll come back and say, "Oops, sorry," because it was the Obama administration that signed the JCPOA, and Trump that completely negated it. But instead of doing that and coming back to putting the JCPOA back in action, the Biden administration tried to play hardball by placing additional demands that were not in the JCPOA for Iran. Not only that, but during the Trump years, additional sanctions were placed on Iran, which actually made parts of the JCPOA irrelevant. So the Biden administration really didn't want to renew the JCPOA for several reasons. One is, of course, domestically being tough on Iran, kind of like being tough on China, is a popular thing among U.S. politicians. But aside from that, and I think the bigger issue is Iran, whatever its internal contradictions and whatever challenges it's going through, is a state that has been a thorn on the side of the U.S. because of its continuous standing with the Palestinian people, because it stood up to the U.S. effort to overthrow the Syrian state, because of the U.S. efforts to turn Iraq into another Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, which failed. So Iran in the Middle East is an independent country that does not take its orders from Washington. And its economy, again, also with many contradictions, but it's not a client state. There are no McDonald's and Starbucks in Iran or other US products. And from the perspective of the US, this kind of stuff cannot be tolerated. So while the two parties have different tactics, and it's certainly the Republicans and certainly the person of Trump are far more militaristic in their dealing with Iran. All sides of the US ruling class really want Tehran to be overthrown, and they want to take it back to the days of the Shah when Iran was a US client state.
Right, and I think it's really interesting to take it to the fact that this is all happening at a time when, Iran is not a weak country, despite decades and decades of U.S. sanctions and, of course, many attempts to weaken it in other ways as well, including like covert operations and in some cases just open aggression. Iran is not a weak country. It's quite a powerful country, and it's made even more powerful, I think, by the recent joining or being invited to BRICS. It's one of 4 countries in the Middle East region that's joining BRICS. It's the first time BRICS has expanded in a very, very long time. And the fact that Iran is on that list, I think, demonstrates that at least some other very powerful countries do see Iran as an important player economically. And of course, you have the recent Iran-Saudi detente, which changes, I think, the power dynamics in the region, and also, I think, weakens the U.S. position. And I'm just curious, how would you place all of this, if it is at all related, into the fact that Iran did just join BRICS and there has been this detente with Saudi Arabia?
No, they're, compared to last year about this time, when Ibrahim Raisi, the president, also gave a talk at the UN General Assembly, several things have changed, making Iran's position much stronger than it was before. One is their acceptance into BRICS, as you mentioned, Rania, which is an important thing and actually kind of shatters the notion that Iran is isolated by the international community, because the international community that they talk about is really the U.S. and its partners that have been trying to isolate Iran. The fact that Saudi Arabia, and not just Saudi Arabia, of course, United Arab Emirates and the other Persian Gulf Arab monarchies have reestablished relations with Iran, mediated by China, I should add, is a major setback for U.S. foreign policy in the region, and a major gain by Iran. Another thing that should be mentioned also is that last year about this time, it was the beginning of the so-called Women, Life, and Freedom movement, which was I don't know if the term movement is the right term for it, but it was the death of Mahsa Amini in custody, and subsequent information has proven beyond a doubt that she did not die as a result of any violence or anything. But regardless, there were weeks of actions, many of them a campaign of sabotage funded from people on the outside, from bodies on the outside. But regardless of all of that, just on the anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, September 16th, there was expectations of large demonstrations. The Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, called for people to go out. Many other opposition leaders abroad called for people to stage large demonstrations, and literally nothing happened on the demonstrations. So it's BRICS, it's a regional detente, it's the economy has stabilized somewhat, and the attempts to overthrow or severely destabilize politically the Islamic Republic have all failed. So in that sense, Raisi and the Islamic Republic are in a more confident position right now.
No, I think that's a very important point. And just the final question I'll ask you is, one of the points that the president made is that the money that's been released to Iran will be used heavily for humanitarian needs. Now, I was hoping you could talk, as someone who travels to Iran, pretty regularly, what the impact is of the sanctions, that they, desperately need $6 billion for humanitarian relief.
Yes, Eugene. The thing about sanctions is this. On the one hand, you have several Iranian officials saying, "Oh, the sanctions are nothing. We're doing just fine." And this is, part of the thing because you don't want to tell your enemies that, they're weakening you. The sanctions do have an impact. They do weaken the Iranian economy, like I said, because it's not about just the U.S. It's that Iran can't trade in dollars with anyone, with any country. So therefore, it makes it much more difficult and at times impossible and much more expensive to do trade. As a result, the Iranian currency, the rial, has taken a tumble several times, including over the last year. So the sanctions are very damaging. And, the talk about sanctions not being important are inaccurate. At the same time, if you think about sanctions and if we think of the situations that they put, for example, the U.S. put Iraq in after, the 1991 bombing and destruction of the infrastructure in Iraq, and the fact that you couldn't find anything, any food, any medicine in Iraq. It's not like that. Life in Iran today is very normal. I mean, the stores are all open, the shelves are full. There's medicine, all kinds of medicine at heavily subsidized prices, very cheap. Hospitals are operational, gas stations, banks, everything is open. So in one glance, it's a bustling economy. It's not that people are going hungry. At the same time, the sanctions are making it very difficult for Iran to grow its economy and to have normal, typical economic relations with other economic players.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mazda Majidi of the Answer Coalition, as always, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Eugene,
yes.
Back in July, you might remember the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned 14 Iraqi banks, basically banning them from doing any transactions in U.S. dollars, accusing them of smuggling dollars to Iran. So, these sanctions on Iran go beyond Iran and, of course, affect the region as well. It makes it impossible for the region to have like a normal functioning sort of economic trade that would otherwise exist. And I'll just throw out one more thing. I did get to attend a meeting with the Iranian president a few days ago.
Okay.
And he talked a bit about sanctions to like a room full of DC think tankers. And he was very honest about the impact that it does have on the country. I mean, sanctions are like the number one thing that Iranian officials talk about because it really is a war on people. Yeah. And it's not just in Iran, it's on a third of the world. Mm-hmm. A third of the world is under some sort of U.S. sanction. So it's completely inhumane and destroys lives, like millions and millions and millions of lives, all towards the end of like trying to force a country to do what you want it to do. It's like a very mafia style situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Terrible situation, really. But we will keep moving forward. We'll keep following that story. We want to turn now to Haiti, and we want to cover a number of different elements on Haiti. But of course, the looming issue is the possibility of a new invasion and occupation of Haiti, really led by the United States, but involving Kenya and many others. We are very, very honored to be joined here on the show by Mamira Prosper, who's the international coordinator at Community Movement Builders and also the co-host of Haiti, Our Revolution Continues on WBAI. Mamira, thank you so much for being with us. Oh, you might be muted.
Technological gremlins in the house.
Well, we'll figure this one out in a second. Usually it comes here. We'll say more. Well, just to swing back around to our previous topic, I mean, it's just been somewhat amazing to me in the media coverage of this, Rania, is that everyone is sort of, pretending like, or I guess, let me put it to you like this, the way they're sort of saying it about these people who are in Iran, these dual American citizens. And look, I don't know what happened. I wasn't at their trial. I don't know. So who knows? But they're just acting like it's crazy that maybe they could be spies, which is just sort of an amazing thing to me because, I mean, even many newspapers like the New York Times have done actually a fair amount of coverage on this massive campaign, mainly led by Israel, but involved with others, assassinating scientists, creating all sorts of different forms of disruption. You've got these groups like the MEK that have been backed by the CIA and others, like pretty openly, who are, pretty consistently trying to launch various terrorist attacks and openly saying they want to do this, that, and the third. So whatever happened in particular, I always find it interesting how in the media, they forget some things they've previously reported. Like they'll report something to say they talked about it, but then it doesn't carry through to how the context of any issue is covered moving forward.
It's funny you say that, because when I was at that event that I mentioned with the Iranian president, I also I need opportunity to mention that there was this one person who asked a question. I won't say who, because it was technically not supposed to. They didn't want anyone to know they were there, but who asked a question about the prisoner exchange and framed the Americans being held in Iran as hostages. And the Iranian president was like, "Excuse me, no, prisoners. There was trials." And they were charged with something, and they were prosecuted. I mean, you can say what you want about that. Like you said, I wasn't there either. I don't know what was happening in that room. I don't know the evidence. But he was making the point, they, as far as Iran sees it, they committed a crime, which was in this case espionage. They were prosecuted for it. They went to trial for it, and a judge said, yes, you did indeed do this, and then they were sent to prison. So anyways, I just thought that was a funny framing of hostages.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I think we have Mamira Prosper back with us. Can you hear us? Ah, perfect. Got you. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Fraught moment. Of course, Joe Biden got up at the United Nations, said the international community needs to intervene. Kenya seems to be taking the lead. Any day now, it seems like this U.S.-Ecuador draft to bring this forward. But anyway, Mamira, maybe just to advance the ball, I mean, what do you think about the narrative about this first and foremost, which is basically Haiti is overrun with savages, and if America doesn't back some intervention, it's going to be worse than you could ever imagine?
Well, right, of course, we always hear about Haiti being chaotic space, and of course, it is because the images that we see are often of dark-skinned Black men burning tires, and that is put up against the gang violence. And it serves to confuse us so that we cannot tell the difference, between people who are protesting against corruption, against material conditions that are deplorable, poverty, state abandonment, versus folks who are very much operating as paramilitaries. And if we look at when the gang violence really popped off, you can see a direct correlation that it is a response, a form of repression unofficially by the state against movement that had really coalesced and culminated into taking over the country in 2018. And right when this happened, we're talking about millions of people throughout cities of Haiti in 2018, what many call the Petro Challenge. And immediately after, you have the gang starting to massacre people in large numbers, particularly targeting neighborhoods where people were coming out in great numbers to the protests, So if we lose that analysis and we do not trace back how these gangs started coming to this moment, then we miss out, what's really happening. And it's our job to pull apart these different things, So I wanted to say that. But of course, to the dominant media in the global north, in the West, these are all same, Black bodies just running around and they're unruly. And the struggle that's taking place on the ground, is completely obscured. And one of which is that Haitian people, are done with the current situation and have said that this state, these people who have self-appointed are not the ones that we have chosen. And they are not leading us into a kind of development or collective self-determination that reflects, us.
So I think that's a really good point, especially because, of course, the issue of gangs, like Eugene mentioned, is always being invoked to justify some sort of intervention. You have Kenya saying that they've committed to leading a multinational force to Haiti to combat gangs in conjunction with the U.S. And even Haiti's prime minister is, has been basically requesting and supporting this kind of deployment. So I guess the question becomes, why all of this? Like, why do all of these different characters? Why does America need to invoke gang violence to intervene in Haiti? What is it about Haiti that's so important that Haiti isn't allowed to be an independent state?
Right. I mean, those are great questions. I will say first and foremost, Haiti has been in the 21st century this place that a lot of other countries trying to emerge right into the ranks of the developed nations have come to want to occupy in order to demonstrate right that they are too ready right for global leadership. I say this because we see continual occupation of Haiti in the 21st century starting in 2004. So, a lot of folks were saying no to occupation on the ground. Folks were saying no to occupation in the diaspora, internationalist allies, right? It's because we know that there's already the history of occupation in Haiti. In fact, right, this version of Haiti starts almost 100+ years ago when the U.S. formally occupied Haiti, 1915, with U.S. troops coming out of the U.S. South who had been trained with Jim Crow tactics and left afterwards, right? The army, we know that's what the US does. They occupy territory, they build up the army continues to do the work, right? We have black hands, certainly, but white supremacist values in terms of how they are treating the population. Certainly also, what is it that these forces protect? And we can come back to the gangs and enter the gangs in the picture, but they protected, right? Multinational / transnational extractivist projects. We're talking about industrial parks. We're talking about, right, big plantations. We're talking about mines, right, for gold and other minerals, and a little less tourism, right? But we're talking about the extractivist project that these armed forces were made to protect, right? So there's that logic of it. So when you have this army being removed when the deposed president Jean-Bertrand Aristide comes back in 1994, then Haiti is going to need, right, some external force to come in every so often and push back against the people when they're not agreeing to what Haitians have come to call the plan of death that is laid out for Haiti. So we have in 2004, after several years of folks fighting on the ground, right, pushing against low minimum wages, pushing against, right, the fact that the state isn't investing or is not allowed to invest sufficiently enough into social programs, right, that you're going to have the imposition of this UN force, which is 5,000 soldiers coming out of Latin America. So one thing about like how empire moves in relation to Haiti is after every occupation, those who came to occupy, their faces change. So if in the 1915 you had U.S. South Marines coming in, 1994 you're gonna put Haitian Americans right in the mix. 2004 you're gonna throw in some Latin Americans in the mix, and maybe why not a friendly soccer match between Brazil and Haiti to justify right this new occupation. So you're going to have the empire sort of fine-tuning itself. And this is why this moment is so interesting, because enters Kenya, a black African country, and then Dominican Republic, both countries considered right developing, who are seeing the opportunity for them to raise in the ranks of the interstate system, but certainly right come to make us sympathize more with an occupation of Haiti. Right? Because if right now we saw a whole bunch of white bodies show up on the first Black Republic, it might trigger, right, some responses. But if you see a bunch of Kenyans and Dominicans, read usually as Black, even, then it's okay, right? So I think there's some of that is part of the fine tuning of the tool of empire with Haiti, is that, okay, we have to continually occupy it. We're just going to throw in the lead a different entity. This is why Jamaica was trying to be in the lead. The Bahamas even proposed itself, right? That there's this other game that's being played in terms of who will be the face. But in the end, it's the U.S. that's pulling the strings, right? That's really what it is. In the end, it's part of their plan to be able to continually have power and control over Haiti, which is also has geopolitical implications, right? It has always been a strategic place to control, just like Cuba, right? So of course that it is about Haiti, and it's also about controlling the region. It's not just about Haiti, right? Part of what the gangs facilitate in the territory is the movement of guns and drugs, right? Folks are printing out these maps showing the flow of guns going from the US into Latin America, and right, drugs coming out Latin America into the US, right? So there's many reasons that an occupation of Haiti benefits, right, multiple powers that be. And the Haitian people continue to say, we've already done that, right? The UN mission was there from 2004 to 2017. And during the time they were there is an increase in violence. There are more guns now in Haiti at the number of 500,000 now than there were before, right? These occupiers showed up. So something is amiss.
No, I think you're very right. Something is definitely amiss. I had the honor of being in Haiti in 2021, and many people pointed out to me. They said, all the weapons are coming through these ports that are owned by these oligarchs that are loved in the West. And I saw this morning, Canada has leveled some sanctions against different people, including Jean-Marie Vorbe. And it's almost like now you get the U.S. and Canada and these countries leveling sanctions on these different oligarchs, like, oh, it's so terrible what they're doing, as if they have not been complicit in this from the beginning.
I'm glad you pointed this. The conversation folks around are having about what this moment means, right? That there is a seeming open attack against the traditional oligarchs. And of course, the sanctions are not as great as the ones that we're talking about in the Iranian case, right? We're talking about, we removed your visa or your ability to travel to come to our country, right? It doesn't remove necessarily power to trade with the dollar, which would be perhaps a sanction that can have greater impact by trickle down, since these are also the folks who are holding control over food imports in Haiti, right? So if they were to be hit, then the population could come to suffer as a result of not getting the food stuff, I call it, right? The trash that is being produced elsewhere being dumped onto Haiti. And this is why the canal is such an interesting, right, twist in the story. And I don't know if we'll have time to talk about that, right? But these folks are an elite that was essentially put in place during the U.S. occupation of 1915, right? And these are folks coming out of other regions of the world where U.S. is also, right, colonizing, occupying. So we're talking about the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the British and the French and into the Americans, right, for the scramble of the Middle East, and then facilitating those elites, right, to come and settle into new places to do what? Sell American products. In this case, 1915, we're talking about Ford, Chryslers, right, cars, and other products. And so you're going to have, right, after the U.S. removes itself, a deliberate breaking and replacing of the old elites with this new elite coming out of, right, this other region of the world. So is there something happening in this moment when the U.S. is changing up its international partners on the ground in Haiti? I think this is some of what is still unfolding that we have to figure out, like, what do these sanctions actually mean? But I will say that some of the sanctions are coming out of a part of those in the country who are resisting, right? This was some of the work, advocacy work, we turn our nose at that, right? But advocacy work they had done inside the U.S. Congress to target those people, right? So that's also part of the complicated picture when we think about who in Haiti, right, is providing a way out. This is some of the consequence of that kind of advocacy work that they did do.
Mm-hmm. Well, real quick before we move to our next guest, and we're going to keep talking about Haiti, you mentioned it, so I did want to just give you a couple minutes if you did want to speak on the canal issue as well.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to say, right, so Abinader goes to the UN, and he backs up Biden's call to occupy Haiti, and he says he's prepared to do the work. And right, he doesn't mention that Saturday is the 10th anniversary of the 2013 amendment constitutional amendment that was passed in the Dominican Republic, stripping Dominicans of Haitian descent from their citizenship all the way up to 1929. He doesn't mention that he's been building a wall since 2022 to separate out Haiti from the Dominican Republic, right? And these are things that he does not highlight that are part of the context for this tension around the canal again, because part of this fight around the canal is going back to this treaty in 1929 that was signed between the two countries. 1929 is coming up again as this significant year that shapes Haitian-Dominican relations. What's happening then? You had U.S. occupation of Haiti, and you had U.S. had been just removed itself from the DR, right? Deciding on how this island is going to be separated and what kind of projects are going to happen where and when. And I want to say that this wall happens to be right by the canal, around the region of the canal. The canal happens to be also close to a free trade zone that produces garments. And if you look at Dominican economy, the second largest importer of Dominican goods is Haiti, garments coming out of this factory, right? And I think this is something that we need to pay attention to, why this particular region is so important for him to protect, and then to claim that gang violence all the way in Port-au-Prince is going to have an impact on his border. His wall is being privileged in that same area, right? There's also gold mines in that area. So there's a way too that it's being reduced to anarchists building a canal, and the real things at stake. And it's not the small farmers, Dominican farmers, who depend on the river, right? He's sort of like throwing that in there. But what he's really protecting are the gold mines, right? The garment industries that are all around that region where he's building this border. And the canal now has become a really big, right, thorn in his plan. So I just wanted to sort of point that out as we close out.
Mm-hmm. No, critically important, and I really appreciate you being willing to join us. Mamira Prosper, International Coordinator of Community Movement Builders and co-host of Haiti, Our Revolution Continues on WBAI. Happy to have you, and happy to have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's just so crazy when you think about or when you hear the reality of what multinational corporations that are just so successful and so make huge, massive profits, how they use the U.S. military basically to force their access to basically slave labor.
Indeed.
And resources around the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to continue on that note, and we are very, very honored here to be joined as we continue to talk about Haiti by Edwidge Danticat, who is a Haitian-American novelist and the Woon Sun Mellon Professor of Humanities, African-American and African Diaspora Studies at Columbia University. Ms. Danticat, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so very much for having me.
Well, it's really an honor to have you with us. I was actually talking with several people before the show about how much we love so many of your novels. But obviously, this is a huge moment happening right now, for Haiti. I think also for the Dominican Republic. You have so many things on the table. You probably heard some of our past conversations. So I'll just maybe ask you, why has this issue of building a canal in the northern portion of Haiti become such a rallying cry for Haitians in the way that it seems to over the past week or so?
Well, I think the issue of the canal, as Dr. Prosper said, it's so important to Haiti in so many ways. First of all, as she mentioned, the 1929 treaty between Haiti and the Dominican Republic allows, first of all, for the canal to happen. And there's been attempts before to build the canal. In 2018, when Jovenel Moïse started it, and they had a firm from Cuba come and complete about 60% of it. But when he passed away, the construction stopped, and then people then, needing this canal, then decided to start building it on their own. But the canal issue, I think it's something the whole world should be paying attention to, because first of all, it addresses this issue. I've heard most of my adult life that future wars will be fought over water and resources like that. And you're having an example right now in Haiti, because Haiti is always in a way at the forefront of certain movements and revolutions. You're having this play out right now, where people with more, with more backing, with more funds are saying, we're going to stop you from building one canal, where the Dominican Republic has built 11 waterways off the same river. And even Abinader, when he addressed, to say we're going to close all the borders to Haiti, said that they control something like 88% of this river, which starts on the Dominican side, but flows through Haiti and is enriched in many places by other Haitian rivers. And I think that the gold mine should very much be paid attention to. This week it was reported that there's a contract with Barrick Gold and Unigold to build a gold mine right on this same border where this river is, and that because of this there'll be water. There's just going to be, the water's going to be poison. That area will be a desert if that gold mine comes there. And in addition to that, they've announced, in addition to closing the borders, that they're going to build a dam further up that then will close the whole area to the river at all. So I think these farmers in Haiti who have been, quietly trying to get this done for this plain, which is a very important area for feeding the rest of the region. They represent, I believe, what it's a David and Goliath fight, really. Abinader is in election mode. He's using anti-Haitian, for his own benefit. But at the same time, you have this group of people who are resisting. And on the anniversary, as Dr. Prosper mentioned, of the La Sentencia, that stripped many of them of nationality, who have been there for generations, but also close to the anniversary of the massacre of Haitians that were ordered by the Dominican dictator Trujillo in 1937. And he too, Trujillo, said that that massacre happened because they were protecting farmers, which is something that's been very much repeated this week.
I think it's really interesting how, just reading about the story, the Dominican leadership has been denouncing the Haitian leadership, even though the Haitian government isn't doing anything at all to protect their own citizens living in this area. Can you talk a bit about what people in this area are doing to push back? Because they've kind of, taken matters into their own hands, because this is, of course, their livelihood.
Yes, I mean, this is an area that I know somewhat well because I've gone quite often, and I used to go quite a bit when I was researching a book that I wrote on this massacre. It's an area that, the Dominican policy from Trujillo on, especially in the border areas, is always it's a policy for them of contrast. So they want to, these and not Dominican people. I think there's really wonderful relations between the people themselves, neighbors, like they'll call it each other, like Haitians will say, "M'pral voisin," I'm going to the neighbors. And there's that, fraternité, if you will. But these governments have always created a policy of contrast. They're African, we're European, they practice voodoo, we're Catholic, and they really use those types of, they use tropes in order to separate people, but they also, when the election time is coming, as it is for Abinader, then if you want to win, you sort of hold up this Haitian menace. And I think the people on the border who are used to this fraternity between each other, then and also are abandoned really by their state. For the last 10 years, we've had a really predatory state in Haiti, where the people in power in Haiti have actually seen themselves more in Dominican elites than they have in the poor, especially the rural people of Haiti. So, so these people, after waiting, I think waiting for the government to do it, they've decided to do it in their together. And that's we have precedent in Haitian culture, especially in Haitian rural culture for this, and combit, where people, you work my land today, I'll work yours tomorrow. People are used to working each other, in this rural space. They're used to working together. They're used to this system of lacus, of communities, because they have not been able to count on their state. They've been able to count on their neighbors. So I think with this canal, it's become such a rallying cry and a symbol for all of us in Haiti and the diaspora, because it's, people acting fully together. And I think Abinader was hoping that his the closing the borders and the blockades would bring people to their knees. But on the other hand, he's kind of, united a lot of the community. We've had, because of all the things that are happening in Port-au-Prince, a lot of people coming to the rural areas because of these paramilitary groups, these criminal armed groups in the city. So a lot of people, including my relatives, have had to leave their homes in the city to go back to the rural area. So then people are looking at themselves, people like, well, if we don't have those places to go, what is left? And I think there's a lot of things coming together in this moment that is rallying people. That is, people are coming from all over. People are sending money so that the canal could be completed, because it's more than a canal at this point. And part of it is the Dominican government, Abinader has made it that they've made it a symbol of resistance against bullying, because the military, they've really militarized the border too. It's not just closing the border, but it's an army on this border. And why, and who are they going to fight against? People building a canal.
No, I think that's an extraordinarily important point, and we saw Abinader meet yesterday with President William Ruto of Kenya, who thanked him for supporting Kenya backing into the country. But I wonder how you see these two issues intersecting, coming almost at the same time. I mean, obviously the canal issue became a big issue. The Dominican Republic has been all over the UNGA trying to, create their own narrative about it. At the same time that everyone from Biden on down is really pushing aggressively to have this intervention force be set in the next few days. I mean, how do you see these two issues coming together in terms of what we're seeing elites in U.S., Canada, Dominican Republic, and other seem to come together at this moment, both for an invasion and in opposition to the Haitian people's sovereignty?
Well, I think whenever people who follow Haitian politics very closely, there's always an uptick in violence right before these meetings. And there was an extraordinary it's just really a huge spike right before the expected September 15 vote on the UN resolution. So it's almost as if sort of like the people who are behind the scenes, they're just like, here, this is why we should come in. And they want to, there's an effort, it seems, to almost push things, make the people so desperate that, that they leave them no other choice. And each time there's a new element added in. And so I think the border issue now, Abinader for years has been, and he touts this himself all the time, going to the UN saying, Haiti must be pacified. And he did it, he did it in 2021. Before he left for the meeting, he said, that's what I'm going to say again. And it's in his, is in its interest to seem almost like he's trying to, he even talks about the canal like, well, it's basically sort of these anarchists building it. And I think, frankly, it seems like, especially in his election year, he's just salivating for an opportunity to join this force that's going to be in Haiti. Like, I think, they're so close already. They're, and actually Dominican forces have already entered Haiti during the building of the canal in 2021. They crossed over and tried to intimidate some of the people who were working in the canal, and that led to a bilateral meeting in which they agreed, and they had a joint statement that the canal was fine based on the 1929 Treaty of Friendship and that both countries had signed. So I think, as Dr. Prosper said, it's trying to find new places, new entries into Haiti. And I think nothing, frankly, with all the abuses that are being right now done to Haitians in the Dominican Republic, and still Abinader presenting himself at the UN as a sane one, as sort of, the one that's kind of keeping the savages in check, and we take care of them. We do our part. Now you do your part. And I think he wants in. I think he really wants to be part of this force, and that's what he's offering himself. And I think symbolically for him, that would be such a victory to finally conquer Haiti.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just ask you this final question before we let you go. What do you make of Ariel Henry coming out and saying that he's going to back the canal sort of out of the blue here at the same time where he's saying he's going to back this invasion? Is it just so much covering of his behind, or is there maybe something else there?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of covering of the behind, because you have also this new development where a lot of these armed groups in Haiti now have come together, and they say, well, we're going to stop fighting the people. We're going to stop slaughtering the people, and we're going to go for Ariel Henry. They've really stated it clearly. So I think that his backing popular movement now, the canal, right? It's there's a lot of people, there's a lot of rallying behind it. And I think he's just trying to join a train that in a way has already left him behind, because a lot of people, he's not popular and he's not legitimate in their eyes. And the state had, he's abandoned the people in so many other instances, and these massacres in the city. And now it's a people's movement, and I think that might offer him some cover. But I don't want to speak for the people in the movement, but I think they have so much support and so much heart and so much fire right now that he had no choice but to kind of join in. But one thing again, before we leave, is that these types of tactics, blockades, and all of that has been used against Haiti since its independence. When in 1804, Haiti had no friends because they were a Black republic that had decided that Black people should be free, and the rest of the world just shut them out. So people have created systems for themselves to survive. Again, like I said, with the combit, which is what we're seeing in a large scale in the canal, and the lakou, and people expressing support. So I think the world should watch this, as I said in the beginning, because it's a battle for small farmers who are just trying to irrigate a plot of land, who are trying to keep their countries alive, against someone, on the other side, a president who wants to win elections, who wants to bring gold mines, who wants to dry off water in a very small place, but a place with great spirit and great heart, and with a revolutionary past and hopefully future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I will join you in those hopes. Edwige Danticada, I have to say it was an absolute honor to have you here with us, and thank you for giving us some of your time here in the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
It's really incredible how Haiti's just like this issue that nobody quite understands, because it seems so complicated, and there's gang violence, and it's just inexplicable and chaotic. And we just had two pretty much experts break it down quite well. And if Americans were able to hear that actual narrative, I think a policy on Haiti would be significantly different than it is today.
Yeah, I think so for sure. And, hopefully it will change. If you want to know more about the sort of history and culture in novelistic form, I can highly recommend checking out Edwige Danticada, who's written many, many novels, among other things, about Haiti. So a lot there. We'll continue to cover it. We're continuing to follow it. We're reaching also out to our friends journalistically in Haiti as well, so we can get as much information as possible. But we are going to switch gears here now to the Horn of Africa, and we are very, very happy to be joined here once again by Ilyas Amari, who is a contributing editor to and a host at the Horn of Africa TV. Ilyas, as always, thank you so much for being with us here on the show.
We have another situation.
Oh, you might not be able to hear us.
Technological gremlins
Ilyas,
strike
can you hear
again.
us? I think he's still trying to see if he can hear us.
Oh,
we'll
maybe.
figure
Oh
this
no,
out.
it's like both ways.
Listen, it happens sometimes.
Oh, this is a catastrophe.
Yeah, well, I'm
No,
sure we'll be able to
get it
figure
fixed.
that one out. But yeah, before we get into that, maybe just to reach back to the other piece, just for people to know what to look for. So allegedly tomorrow, there's supposed to be a multinational technical meeting at the United Nations around the possibility of an invasion and occupation of Haiti. And then at some point, maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, there's a draft of the UN, authorization, quote unquote, that is being written by the US and Ecuador now that will be voted on. And then ostensibly, once that happens, then Kenya will move in with 1,000 police officers, maybe a number of others coming from different Caribbean countries. But I think the thing that's so notable is, it's like, who are some of these people? I mean, Kenya obviously has had massive unrest, and the police there are well known for being very, very abusive. But Ecuador to be writing this is unbelievable. I mean, the prison system is totally collapsed. There's huge massacres happening in the prisons all the time. They just had a presidential candidate assassinated on the campaign trail by narco mafias. So it's just like, of all people to be talking about, oh, we're, going to go into this country or that country or whatever, and help them. It's just, America itself. Look at the amount of gun violence happening here in the United States. Who is the U.S. to be saying that we're going to go in and police something? It really is just absurd.
Maybe we should be drafting some sort of legislation or someone should be trying to intervene in this country. Eugene, I have to say, I feel like every time I visit here, I say the same thing and I sound like a broken record, but I don't care. I'm going to do it
That's
again.
okay.
Every time I come back to New York, which is like the center of finance, right?
Yes.
In this very, very wealthy country that we live in that basically occupies the entire world because we're so powerful and rich. Because we occupy the entire world. I always come here and I'm always blown away by so many things. The homeless situation seems to constantly get worse. I'm not really sure how that's possible, but you just see these really expensive stores full of items that nobody can afford, and there's people outside. I think I saw somebody with a sign. It was something like, I have stage 3 pancreatic cancer, please help. And I'm just like, what? And then you're in the subways and you see children begging and also selling candy, which is something I've actually never seen here until now. And I know this is an issue with the migrant, the migrant issue, and there's basically migrant children now being forced to sell gum and candy in subways to make some sort of money, and it's really sad. But it's something that it's pretty typical of third world countries. But I've just never seen that here. And we're talking the richest country in the world. You have these mass shootings. You have this medical debt. You have this student debt, and you just have people seeming I don't know. I get this sense that people are about to snap because there's just no safety net here. So I don't know. We're gonna intervene in somebody else's country to help when we have tent cities in America. There's literally cities in America that have entire areas where the people live in tents.
Yeah.
Because they can't afford housing, because housing costs are too high and jobs don't pay enough. It's unbelievable what kind of country this is. It's just up and down when America's running around lecturing the world. Not to mention our prison system here, which is a little fascist system in and of itself, which I was talking about with somebody earlier who had to endure spending some time in it. That is hidden from most Americans' view. So yeah. You're gonna go to Haiti and save them? No, you're gonna go to Haiti and exploit them and make sure that they stay, poor and gang ridden, so that you can continue to take their resources and use their labor at the cheapest of prices.
Absolutely. It's quite frankly what they've always been doing. People. The thing is that you don't really get any true information. You don't get real information about Haiti by and large in the U.S. media. I was so stunned after Jovenel Moise, the president before the current prime minister, is not really the prime minister, but was able to seize power. After that, President Moise was assassinated. And, as soon as he was killed, it was there's 35 New York Times people on the ground. They had a live blog. They were covering everything. They were doing this. And I found it so interesting because when I was there in 2021, the New York Times also had a reporter there at the same time. She was only talking to a handful of high-level officials, many of them people from foreign countries. And she made some sort of side comment in one of her articles about how it was difficult to find Haitians to talk to when I had been talking to dozens of Haitians just 10 minutes before. But it was the shallowest possible coverage you could ever have. But then as soon as there's a big crisis in Haiti, Haiti. It was the same with the earthquake. These people descend, they do major coverage for 2 weeks, and then they leave, and that's basically it. So you don't get a lot of the background information that's necessary. We'll have to talk about that at another time.
Well, they do that in the Horn of Africa, by the way, too, there's your segue.
That's true. Thank you for that. We do have Ilyas Samari of Horn of Africa TV back with us. Ilyas, thanks for joining us. Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, no. Oh, there we
hear
can.
you. Now we can. Now we can.
Success.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Perfect.
Thanks for inviting me again, Rania.
No, of
Eugene.
course.
Sorry about the glitch.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Great to have you here. Well, in a way, I wish it was under better circumstances, but nonetheless, this week we've seen this release of this new, alleged UN human rights report, although it's sponsored by the UN, but it has its own provenance. But nonetheless, going back to what we've been hearing for the past 3 years about the recent war in northern Ethiopia, waged by the TPLF against the Ethiopian government and against the Eritrean government, and also against many Ethiopian people and surrounding regions around Tigray. This sort of rehashing the same thing, that there were a lot of human rights abuses by the Ethiopian government, by the Eritrean government. But one of the things I noted, and where I really wanted to start here, is it actually says in the Al Jazeera article about this, when they were interviewing one of the people behind it, they were like, but really is whatever we can say about Ethiopia, the Eritreans, they were the worst. Eritrea is the worst of the worst. And I just thought to myself, this is sort of amazing in a way, that a country is invited by their neighboring country to come help them with a security issue, totally legally from the point of view of international law. And they have somehow, that country, Eritrea, become the centerpiece of all negative discussion about what took place there, while the entity that started the war, the TPLF, is barely talked about. So the first question I just had to ask you is, why is it that Eritrea, this small country, is being the most demonized in the context of everything that's being alleged here about this conflict?
Well, Eugene, it's par for the course for Eritrea. It has been this demonization, relentless smear campaign, psychological warfare, negative propaganda has been there for the past, say, 25 years. But in particular, in this latest war, that the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front itself, ignited on November 3, 2020. That's beyond a shadow of doubt. They themselves have admitted it. But as you said, the TPLF gets away scot-free. It should be on the docks facing war crimes charges. But it's all demonizing Eritrea. And it seems to me now, after 3 years, 2 years of the war, and then the Pretoria Agreement last year, 2022, cessation of hostilities, the TPLF is still at large. It has not been completely disarmed. It is right now in Tigray. Tigray is a hellhole under the TPLF. Breakdown of law and order, lawlessness, looting, plundering, rape, all kinds of horrendous things. But those are never brought to the fore. The crimes that the TPLF committed, the child soldiers, the crimes in the Amhara region, the crimes in the Afar region when it launched the war, the atrocities it committed in Maikadra and what have you. The list is so long that one would think that they would at least, the Western propaganda media would at least cover 10% of it. But no, it's shifting the blame, scapegoating Eritrea. So the ultimate target, it seems to me, even when the TPLF launched the war, was, Eritrea. Of course, on the way, they would also do regime change and return to power in Addis Ababa to overthrow the federal government led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali. But the charges have been there, fabricated, concocted. The Aksum massacre, while the war was going on in 2020, 2021, it was proven to be utterly false. Those charges were bogus. Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, they were caught red-handed fabricating lies. But yet they double down and do more lies, more fabrications of these atrocities. It is reminiscent of what what Amnesty International did in 2011 when the war against Libya was being prepared. You fabricate human rights atrocities. Gaddafi and the Libyan regime is committing atrocities, bringing black soldiers, committing rape, Viagra stories, all kinds of horrendous stories that later were proven to be false. And Amnesty International itself did a mea culpa after the fact. But by that time, Libya was destroyed and Gaddafi was assassinated. So it seems to me this is like a preparation for an R2P type responsibility to protect humanitarian intervention type of relentless war propaganda on Eritrea. So I say this is part of the course for Eritrea.
And, I think a part of, and this is actually like common, right, among any country that's targeted by U.S. imperialism is, of course, let's call them the U.S. regime media. The U.S. capitalist press is very much aligned with the State Department and will just repeat whatever the State Department says. And part of the sort of like, what are the weapons in that very large toolbox of sort of information warfare against a country like Eritrea, as well as many other countries targeted by the U.S. this way, is using the diaspora that doesn't agree with the government that, or is on the side of the U.S. to kind of like push that narrative as well, which you see quite often with Eritrea. You'll see that, regardless of the fact that much of the Eritrean diaspora is actually quite supportive of their country, those who are in the opposition and outside of the country often get, the microphone, get the airtime, get quoted. But I think one thing that's interesting is there's been a kind of uptick, it seems, in violence from this group of people. I know in the past few months, Eritrea has been celebrating the anniversary of its independence, and there's been these cultural festivals in various cities around the world. And there was recently one in Germany where there was a massive, violent attack by Eritrean opposition against those who support Eritrea. Something similar happened in Sweden a few months ago. And I think in Toronto, there was an Eritrean cultural festival that was actually canceled because opposition was, making threats. And I mean, this is like actual violence we're talking about. So I guess I'm just curious if you could talk a bit about the influence of sort of the Eritrean opposition activists in the diaspora in the sort of information warfare against Eritrea.
Well, Rania, this I see it as a last desperate attempt they've tried regime change in Eritrea for over 2 decades. They've imposed their baby killer sanctions. I prefer to call them baby killer sanctions because the sanctions kill babies. They've tried isolation, encirclement. They've tried proxy wars through their client puppet regime in the region, the TPLF, against Eritrea. Everything that was tried to bring about the regime change, overthrow, failed miserably. So this I see as a last desperate attempt to, bring about hooligans, recruits of the ethno-fascist TPLF in the diaspora who came as Eritreans, and they claim to be Eritreans, but they're not Eritreans, because we know from records that 60% of those that came as refugees claiming to be Eritreans, because European countries, the United States, were granting blanket political asylum to anybody who claims to be from Eritrea, part of the attempt to depopulate Eritrea, to drain it of its vital youth force. Over the past years, thousands have been coming, claiming to be Eritreans from the Tigray region in particular, but from elsewhere in the Horn of Africa. So what you saw, these attacks on Eritrean festivals that you witnessed recently, that you mentioned in Germany, UK, Sweden, even Israel, Canada, the United States, are last desperate attempts by these hooligans to create, to manufacture sort of schism within the Eritrean community, which is for the most part patriotic. It may be the mainstream. I mean, I'm talking about the majority, the bulk of the majority may not be overtly or actively political. But when it comes to their homeland, their country, they don't want anything bad to happen to Eritrea. They don't want sanctions against Eritrea. They don't want Eritrea to be relentlessly demonized. So they stand fiercely, despite political differences, with their people and their country. I mean, this is natural reaction. So these hooligans have been recruited to create a violence, and as you said, and then the mainstream regime media of the West cooperates in this and portrays it as if it's violence of Eritreans against Eritreans. Nothing could be further from the truth. The majority of these are from the Tigray region, the recruits of the TPLF, supporters of the TPLF. But they're masquerading as Eritreans. True, there may be a sprinkling of a few Eritreans with them, but about 90% of them are TPLF, followers. And so this is a continuation of the TPLF war that failed miserably the past 2 years in Ethiopia, against Ethiopia and Eritrea. The TPLF was defeated. It was forced to sign the Pretoria cessation of hostilities. So the violence is being exported, so to speak, to the West. And the target here is the Eritrean people, their culture, their identity. And the reaction we're seeing is that Eritreans are unified. On the contrary, when such attacks come, it unifies us. The secondary contradictions, the minor political differences are put aside, and we stand aside. We are like that. I mean, decades of struggle against all odds. These cultural festivals, by the way, have been going on in Europe and the United States, in the West, for the past 5 decades. No violences have been witnessed before. So this is a new phenomenon, but it's the last desperate attempt, I would say, of failing empire. The unipolar hegemony is declining. This is the global. If you look at the global situation, the crisis of the unipolar hegemon, we're seeing the war on two fronts against Russia, against China has failed. The global South is awakening. We've seen the BRICS emerging strongly. Europe is in decline. Its economy, the proxy war that they have unleashed on Ukraine has backfired. Winter is coming. This winter is going to be terrible. So, in a way, I also see that this may be a preparation for fascism on the rise in Europe, where the migrants, the black refugees, will be scapegoats. As in the 1930s, there were Jews to be scapegoats. Anti-Semitism was there. So who's going to be, when the economic crisis hits Europe, who's going to be the scapegoat? I see, you may call me conspiracy theorist, but that also may be at play. In any case, what we've witnessed here was that the law enforcement, the police were in cahoots with the disruptors, with the violent thugs. They let them, they treated them with kid gloves. They let them get away scot-free with violence, with injuries. Even in some countries like Germany, the police themselves were stopped. Who gets away with such kind of hooliganism, with such kind of lawlessness and violence? Where in the West can black men get away with violence
really
against police?
Yeah.
We're living here in the United States. We know what happens to any black man who steps out of line.
Right.
The police don't even need excuses to shoot black people, to choke black people. We know what happened to George Floyd. That's recent memory. So this, I think, is an orchestrated, well-coordinated global attack against the Eritrean diaspora community, which for the most part is patriotic and is standing by its country. It is part of the war against Eritrea, I can conclude.
Well, Ilyas, as always, really appreciate you helping us sort through all of these issues. You're a contributing editor at Horn of Africa TV. And as always, thanks so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Rania and Eugene, thanks as always. I'm becoming a frequent guest, and I like that.
So do we. Yeah, it was amazing. The terrible issue. I'll just also note it's come a lot of this demonization coming at the same time that the African Development Bank president just went to Eritrea and made a number of very positive comments about the country. So isolation breaking there. But we are going to switch gears here to U.S.-Ukraine relations. I guess that's the best way to talk about it. Very happy to be joined here by Ben Becker, editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News, to discuss Zelenskyy, who is at the UN General Assembly and also coming to Congress for money. Ben, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thanks for having me again.
Well, Zelenskyy is back. I feel like he was just here. He spoke at the UN General Assembly and did some of those, things that happened at the UN General Assembly, but he will be imminently descending upon Congress. Give us a sense of what's the agenda, what's he doing here, and what can he expect?
Oh, the same thing he does every time he comes here. He's coming for more money. It feels a bit like a Groundhog Day, where we've seen this, and it's sort of the same story over and over again. Perhaps the initial theater or drama of it may have been there the first moment, but now that it's happened again, I think many people are tired of it, are fed up with it. He's here for another $24 billion, which Joe Biden is already been, sort of paving the way for and has promised. And so today he went to Congress. He met with Kevin McCarthy, who, despite sort of pretending to be kind of critical or anti-war, apparently was very obsequious in the meeting and saying, please just tell us what you need to win and give us the right talking points so we can convince everyone else that you can really win this war. And then he went to the Pentagon, which I think was actually, he goes to Congress for the money, and then he goes to the Pentagon for his sort of marching orders. He also laid a wreath at the Pentagon 9/11 memorial, which I actually thought was a bit rich. Of course, it's sort of, for people who are in the anti-war movement, we know how 9/11 is always instrumentalized and how it's been utilized for the forever wars. And I guess for a guy who wants to have a forever war, a new forever war, why not make it about 9/11? He thinks that people are so dumb that we're just going to kind of fall for that and say, here, please take tens of billions more in an unwinnable war, a war that could end, a war that, frankly, from a military standpoint, already is basically at a kind of stalemate, or worse even for Ukraine, that really they should be in ceasefire, peace negotiations if this was a policy guided by anything reasonable or sort of a sober assessment of the correlation of forces. But instead, it feels like we're going to just endless escalation and endless amounts of resources that could be used on the people of the United States or on other good causes around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, the ultimate welfare queen is Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It is really incredible. I mean, the way that everybody else has to constantly tighten their belts is like, we're constantly denied in America any sort of like level of safety net or security. But when it comes to war, and, Zelenskyy sort of like the ultimate lobbyist at this point for the most important war at the moment, there's always money for it. But I think there's a few other interesting things happening in the backdrop of this, Ben, and that is the fact that you have countries like Poland and Slovakia and Hungary being sued by Ukraine because Ukraine wants to like dump its grain in these countries. And now Poland this is like more, newsy, but Poland is saying it refuses to arm Ukraine anymore. Can you explain what's going on here? It looks like Ukraine is basically having some fights with its friends, although I guess, I don't know if you can qualify Ukraine and Poland as friends given their history, but in this war, they've been friends.
Right. I mean, Poland is a key part of NATO and a very important part of the war effort. In a way, is as anti-Russian a country you can get in terms of the government of Poland. So it is quite significant that if Ukraine loses Poland as an ally, even Poland, I mean, it's pretty, it portends a pretty bad future for their future alliances. I do think that, I mean, it's not 100% clear what it means in military terms because Poland is basically complying with its existing request to provide weaponry to Ukraine. It's basically saying no new weapons until we sort this out. Of course, these are, at the end of the day, still capitalist governments. They have their own sort of border disputes. They have their own national interests. They have their own capitalist interests at play here. And so you could sort of saying as a falling out among thieves in a kind of way. And so it shouldn't come as any surprise. But it is quite shocking, the attitude and conduct of Zelensky. I felt the same thing just looking at his body language. Look in this B-roll here at the UN. I mean, he's like so like angry and tense, and he's basically carrying himself around the world like everybody owes him billions of dollars in endless aid. And, you know, of course, many people around the world, and it's not even the governments, it's actually the people of these countries are starting to ask, is this the best use of our money? Can this war actually be fought? You know, over 500,000 people have died, according to some estimates. 500,000. I mean, that's a huge amount of deaths. Isn't there a way this war can end? And instead, his speech at the UN, excuse me, was basically like bellicose. The war has to escalate. We have to win. You know, we have to keep going, and basically attacking aggressively anyone who raises a different viewpoint. And so that's, of course, most countries in Latin America, most countries in Africa, most countries in Asia. And now I would say increasingly the peoples of Europe and even here in the United States are starting to question this kind of attitude and questioning whether this is becoming an endless, pointless war that only serves the military-industrial complex and only serves U.S. geopolitical interests, which is to weaken and sort of bleed out Russia. This was the whole goal of the war to begin with, I believe.
No, I think that's an extraordinarily important point. I mean, and yeah, he said that Poland was acting as an agent of Russia, which was stunning to me, given that if we really look at the timeline, I mean, Poland was the key country for Ukraine because it was not clear what was going to take place. And, you know, Poland and the UK and the Conservative Party in the UK, Law and Justice in Poland are traditionally very close. And at the same time, Boris Johnson was ramping up the rhetoric. So was Poland. So Ukraine would have already been totally controlled by Russia if it wasn't for Poland in a very early stage, preventing peace alongside the UK and others. But it just shows the level, I think, that you're bringing it to. And I guess, the point that I am curious from your point of view of how and where, it's tough to say that it's trending, but I noticed that in the where it's trending, but how this is impacting U.S. politics. I mean, over the past couple months, obviously, there have been a lot of outspoken Republicans. There can continue to be no Democrats saying anything about this whatsoever. But despite the politicians, I did notice in the YouGov Economist tracking poll, which comes out every couple weeks or so, for the first time amongst Biden voters and self-declared Democrats, the way they asked the question about aid to Ukraine is, should you give more, should you give less, or is it about right? And amongst sort of Biden voters, self-declared Democrats, like more or about right was always the majority for most of the war. Now it's about right and do less. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it jumped off the page to me because that's sort of a big shift, because every liberal commentator, MSNBC, every liberal politician, the Biden administration, like everyone you would look to for leadership if you're in the sort of left liberal Democratic Party sphere, is telling you support Ukraine, yet the support is still softening. So do you think this actually might be a bigger issue for President Biden than I think is being discussed now once we get into campaign season in the spring of next year?
I think it very likely could be a big campaign issue and a big vulnerability for Biden. I think that's sort of why the clock is kind of ticking from the military standpoint. We're also getting into colder weather in Ukraine and Russia, whether that means there probably won't be big Ukrainian breakthroughs coming up. That means by the time that you sort of start to have warmer weather, we're fully in the 2024 campaign season. And so it's looking like this is going to be a big campaign issue. I do think that, they're assuming, it seems, that the support for this endless war and endless war spending will continue. But I don't think they should be so sure. I mean, it's true that I think people have had their heads kind of scrambled around this war. People who were typically anti-war and, resistant to foreign intervention are now some of the loudest champions of it. But I do think there's this reservoir, this base of support for essentially an anti-war position. And people can be, I think, won over on the basics of what a peace economy would look like versus a war economy. I have some numbers here just to give you an example of the kind of things that I think that Republicans, even opportunistically, are going to be able to make use of especially if Democrats don't start speaking up against this war. The things that were cut out of the Infrastructure Act, these are the things that were cut out. 2 years free community college, $22 billion. That's how much that would have cost for the whole country. $24 billion dental coverage for all seniors, because dental coverage is not covered in Medicare.
Crazy.
Because when you get old, your teeth get a lot better, so you don't really need dental care that much. Then you have $40 billion for universal child care and pre-K. $40 billion. So you add those three numbers up, that's about the same amount that's been spent on Ukraine in 1 year. And not really on Ukraine, basically on military industrial complex in Ukraine. So, this is all the basic strategic professed priorities of the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party base are to expand the quality of life, the social programs, that the huge gains in productivity in this country, the huge profits that are being made by Wall Street tycoons and big tech, that these should actually be used to improve the country's infrastructure, high-speed rail. Again, that got $10 billion or something, 1/10, in other words, of what's being used to basically lead for the meat grinder of the Ukraine war, the slaughterhouse really of just sending constant weapons, which means constant death, destruction of the country of Ukraine, the actual territory and the land, this fertile agricultural zone just being wrecked. That's what the country's resources are going to. So I do think that a Trump will make a big deal out of it. Again, even opportunistically, he's the guy who assassinated Soleimani, who brought the country, very close to a massive war against Iran, was very bellicose in other ways, was threatening an invasion of Venezuela and so forth. So again, we don't want to put them in a true anti-war colors, but from an electoral standpoint, these are big vulnerabilities. If the Democrats are seen as the war party and the Republicans present themselves as the anti-war party without any real pushback. Of course, that means we need real pushback from the anti-war movement.
Indeed. Well, we are through the looking glass on this one. But as always, Ben Becker, editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News, I really appreciate you being willing to come on to the Freedom Side.
Till next time.
Of course. Hard to book the editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News for a Breakthrough News show. Nonetheless, no, we'll see.
Well, where can I get a ticket to this guy who's running this tour, Zelenskyy? It's like a concert at this point. It's like a global concert. It's bigger than Taylor Swift.
Well, okay, hold your horses now. I'll put some feelers out there for you. No one is bigger than Taylor Swift right now. You look at how much money she's making, maybe the most highest grossing tour in the history of music.
I'm surprised Zelenskyy hasn't gone to Taylor Swift begging
for
money.
She ain't dumb. She ain't alienating anybody. So there's no stances that are going to be taken that don't have at least 70% support in the population. But, all due respect to her. Anyway, let's shift gears here. We want to continue our ongoing coverage of the struggle to stop Cop City, this massive police training facility in Atlanta, which is now escalating. Of course, it's escalating, but the struggle against it is escalating as the repression continues to escalate. And we are very happy to be joined on the show as we continue to discuss by Jamie Peck. Jamie, thanks so much for being with us. Yes.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No. The pleasure is all ours, and I know you've been on tour, so thanks for being willing to join us. But you have been going to different parts of the country to promote an upcoming action in November, Block Cop City, civil disobedience around the Cop City issue. Maybe first just tell us when and where and why you chose these particular tactics.
Yeah, so it is... When you just said so, November 10th to the 13th. Sorry, I literally just got back from a 4-hour drive. I have a few days at home before I go back out on tour again. So I'm a little bit tired. Yes, Veterans Day weekend. We chose this because it's a 3-day weekend, but it's not a religious holiday. No one really has to do much for it. So that's basically an extra day for people to travel and get down there. We also chose November because it was supposed to coincide with the referendum, but unfortunately the city has pushed the referendum back to March at least. So it's not going to coincide with that. But if anything, I think this highlights the fact that we need to have direct action because they are going to try to use every trick in the book to defeat us when it comes to, the democratic process. When, where, Atlanta, obviously, that's where they're trying to build this thing? And why did we choose a mass action of nonviolent civil disobedience? Well, I think, first of all, it's important to note why we didn't choose it, right? We didn't choose it as a way of separating out good protesters from bad protesters, violent from nonviolent ones, people who damage property and people who don't. We chose it because it feels strategic in this moment. Now, why is that the case? Well, the movement has been stuck in a bit of a bind where, on the one hand, more people than ever know about Cop City and oppose it, right? They had a historic campaign to get this referendum on the ballot. Over 120,000 people signed the petition. That's 1 in 5 Atlanta residents.
Wow.
And this has never happened before in the history of Atlanta. The threshold to get a referendum on the ballot is 50,000 signatures, and more than twice the number of people as voted for Mayor Andre Diggins in the last election signed this petition, and they do not want to let the people vote. So more people than ever know about it, more people than ever are opposed. However, the number of people who are willing to show up and put their bodies on the line and do direct action has been dwindling for a number of different reasons. We've been holding out for over 2 years. People are tired. The state repression has gotten so bad. I think 61 people are currently facing RICO charges. 42 people are facing domestic terrorism charges for things like being there at the music festival. Of course, unfortunately, in January, the cops murdered a protester named Forest name of Tortuguita, Manuel Terán, and their mom, Belkis Terán, has actually come from Venezuela to get justice for her child and join the movement and hasn't left ever since. So the repression has been terrible. I don't think most of these charges are going to stick. They're transparently political. Even mainstream legal experts are saying this is an absurd bit of government overreach, charging people with felony intimidation for things like flyering, but scary nonetheless. So we want a way for people to feel not necessarily safe. I don't want to pretend like this is a 100% safe activity, but to feel safer, doing embodied action again. And how are we going to do that? Well, there's safety in numbers. If we have 1,000 people doing an act of civil disobedience on the construction site, drawing on the legacy of the anti-nuclear movement, drawing on the legacy of the civil rights movement, which has deep roots and a deep legacy there in Atlanta. If the cops want to start beating people up for that, if the cops want to charge us with terrorism by the thousands for doing a Kingian act of nonviolent civil disobedience, it would cause a massive political crisis and an international outrage. So it's certainly possible that they will still try to do that, but it seems much less likely. And the state is sort of put in a bind where they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. Right? Mm-hmm. If they charge 1,000 people, including children and clergy, with terrorism, that's going to be an international outrage, and it's going to delegitimize that charge even further than it already has been. If they undercharge people, we know it's not undercharging, but if they charge them less than they have charged other people in the past for doing the exact same kind of thing, that's also going to delegitimize those charges that people are already facing.
Jamie, I'm curious if you could just briefly explain to people, I think sometimes this might seem like a local issue, like, oh, it's in Atlanta, it doesn't really have anything to do with me. I live in, California, or I live in the Midwest, or I live in South Carolina. Why is Cop City something that everybody in the country should be concerned about? And you could even argue internationally, given what it could be used for.
Yeah, for sure. So Cop City is a plan not only to train the cops of Atlanta, but to train the police from all over the country and even places as far-flung as Israel, basically everywhere that there is a militarized fascist police force enforcing, settler colonialism, enforcing racial oppression and class exploitation, which, as we know, global capitalism runs on. They're training the police from all over the place to put down the next popular uprising. How do we know this? These plans kicked into high gear in 2021. What happened in the summer of 2020? We all know what that's about. They're thinking about it in a national context, and so should we. funnily enough, we're going on tour to recruit people for this fight. They are as well. Just the other day, the Atlanta Police Department had a recruitment event right here in New York City, and you could see ads for it on the subway because, they've been having trouble recruiting cops in Atlanta. They need police to go there and fight us, basically, in this very important choke point in the fight against both climate change, capitalist destruction of the environment, and against police terror.
I think that's such a great point, and I'm glad you raised the issue of when Cop City arose. And we've seen with the RICO charges, the conspiracy, the alleged conspiracy, I should say, dates back to the day that George Floyd was murdered, and we've seen pretty much since I think the summer of 2020 such an aggressive attempt by the media, by the state, to I think delegitimize what we saw. That millions of people took to the street with a serious critique of the police, of the state, and of prisons in so many ways, and it almost feels like so much is centered on making Cop City happen because and repressing it, the movement against it in so many ways, because they view this as a big inflection point for their attempt to erase from the historical memory what happened in 2020. And if they can corral this and cul-de-sac this, then they might be able to really hold the lid on this broader movement that's been rising in a big way across the country for several years here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think initially, as crazy as it sounds, they wanted to try to capture some of this popular anti-police energy, the same way the Democrats did or the same way the Democrats tried to do, when they kneeled in kente cloths or whatever. The first proposed name for this place was actually the Institute for Social Justice, if you can believe that. But they walked that back pretty quickly. I know. It's truth is stranger than fiction. Now they're calling it, the public safety training facility or whatever. But luckily, the activists really got out in front of it and announced Cop City to the masses for the first time. And so when people first learned about it, they learned about it as Cop City, and even the mainstream press is calling it that right now because that's what it is.
And then I guess, for everybody watching, Jamie, since you're out there recruiting people to care about this fight and even join it, what can they do to get involved?
That's a great question. So we wanted this action to have a very easy on-ramp for people who've never maybe participated in something like this before. So we're currently conducting a nationwide speaking tour. I'm doing the entire Northeast pretty much. Other people are doing other places. And those events are a really great place to meet like-minded people from your area, kind of plug in, learn more about it, start making plans to go to Atlanta. There are also going to be lots of solidarity actions all over the country if you can't make it to Atlanta. But certainly the more people, the better. And we're going to have support roles for people who, for whatever reason, aren't comfortable doing an act of civil disobedience on the construction site. There's going to be music. There's going to be concerts. There's going to be parties. There's going to be talks. It's going to be a very convivial atmosphere that will hopefully get everybody feeling the love and comradeship and excitement.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic. Is there a place they can find it on the internet or social media if they're looking?
Yeah, for sure. The website is blockcopcity.org. And that has all the information you need. Soon to be, there's going to be a tab on resources as well for people who are traveling, because that's a question I've been getting a lot on these tours. We're in college. We don't have any money. How do we do this? I think some churches in Atlanta are going to be opening their doors for people to stay at. So that's pretty exciting. There's usually some camping options. So yeah, people will be very well supported throughout the weekend, for sure.
No, well, and a great launch video, I have to say. So blockcopcity.org, that's the hub if you want to learn more. Jamie Peck with the Block Cop City campaign, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Eugene.
Yes.
I think this was a great show.
Well, I think it's always a great show.
I think it's always a great show, but this one was a special one because
we shouldn't look at each other. That's rude to our guests.
Well, I just want to remind people we're actually in the same room. Look there's my hand. Wow, my arm is not very long. I'm sorry.
Well,
but they saw my hand. They saw my hand. At least
your arm is proportionate to your height.
Thank you. Oh wow, you just told the entire audience
that you're really short.
Yes, I'm very short, you guys. It's very sad for me. Unless you think being tall is sad, which nobody does. I do want to remind people that for those of you Sorry. You can
Okay.
support our wonderful programming here, and you can support my ability to buy heels so I can be taller by going to patreon.com/breakthrough news and becoming a member of Breakthrough News. You can get access to exclusive content, including parts of my show as well as Eugene's monthly seminar. I think it's so important when we're in this situation of like, I don't know, we had so many stories today where not very many people are aware of what we're talking about because there's this massive media apparatus that controls the narrative. And so I think it's so important for those who want to know more about what's actually happening in the world to support independent media, support Breakthrough News, because we're in an information war in so many ways against a massive like tsunami of propaganda that we're trying to, very much pun intended here, break through. So become a member of Breakthrough News at patreon.com/breakthrough news. And you can also access our very cool merch, like these mugs. This beautiful Breakthrough mug. Oh, sorry for my lipstick is on that
That's
side.
okay. No worries about that. We've got T-shirts. We've got all sorts of things. As Rania mentioned, we also have exclusive content. So you really can't go wrong by becoming a monthly contributor via our Patreon. And you will keep us here bringing you all the stories, as Rania just mentioned to, that are struggling to break through, but we can lift them up if we work together. So thanks to everyone who watched. Definitely big shout out to all of our guests, everyone who has donated, our existing patrons, and of course our whole team here at Breakthrough News that makes this show possible behind the scenes. For myself, for Rania, see you next time.